I'm Director of Learning and Development at Apollo. I'm a long-time listener to this conference, first-time presenter, so excited to be here. I've spent about 20 years, not that I like to say that out loud, in L&D. So I started early in my career kind of working in call centers, training folks within call centers, tech support roles. And over the past decade or so, moved more into like learning program management, leadership development, and managing leadership programs and leadership training programs at companies like AWS, Amazon, Toast, and now Apollo. So really excited to talk today about how to align L&D with business priorities. So before I get into it, I just want to do a quick plug for my company. As I mentioned, I work for Apollo, and our mission at Apollo is to make world-class go-to-market accessible for all. And we do this by having this AI-powered all-in-one platform that unifies inbound, outbound, data enrichment, and deal execution. And today, over 2 million users and 500,000 companies use Apollo. So I would say if anyone here is in a GTM enablement team, a GTM team, or maybe a solo entrepreneur, I'd strongly recommend checking out apollo.io to help you find prospects, close deals, and grow your business. Okay, so what am I going to talk about today? There's three kind of main principles I'm going to discuss. First thing is just understand the business to solve business problems. Second thing is operate L&D like a business. And the third one is build credibility instead of asking for it. And in each of these, I'm going to give like 4 tactical tips that's worked for me in my career, and I'd love you just to see if they resonate with you. Within the sections, I'm also going to have emojis in the top right-hand corner. Because I can't see your faces, I'd love to see you react with those emojis so I know you're at least resonating with this or if it makes sense. So you'll see them pop up on the slides. Okay, and of course, being Microlearning conference, lots of GIFs as well. So we're going to include that a lot. So first one is understand the business to solve business problems, not training problems. So this is like something I've really challenged myself throughout the years of my career, which is stop thinking about training problems, start thinking about business problems. And some ways that I try to do that. So the first thing I look to do within the business, and you'll see the emoji is the applause if you want to do that, if it resonates with you, is conducting regular listening tours. So when I join an organization, the first thing that I do is I do like a map of everyone that I need to speak to. Who are the leaders I need to speak to? What are the teams that I need to speak to? Who are the individual contributors, like high-performing individual contributors? And what I do is I draft up questions that I want to ask them to understand what matters for them in the business, what skills, capability, knowledge gaps might exist. I'm really trying to just understand how it is impacting their side of the organization. So I normally reach out to people on Slack, introduce myself, tell them who I am, what my goal is, and then I schedule time. I have a fixed agenda, like I put the agenda in place, but then I'm flexible in the execution of that. I'll talk about that in a second. Additionally, I also do this when new leaders join the company. So when new leaders join the company, I will reach out to them directly. One, because my team manages new hire onboarding, so I let them know that my team's responsible, they can give me feedback. But second of all, I like to understand what's their charter as they come into the business and what are they excited to work on and what's the business problems they're coming in to solve. So this really helps to kind of really just ground yourself in the business. Here's just an example of like some questions that I've drafted in the past that I have ready to go when I meet new leaders. You may not use all of these. Like with AI now, you can draft up really strong, powerful questions related to your context, related to your business, and build something really well. The great thing is well with AI note takers and all, you can be 100% present and focus on the questions. The final thing I'll say here is you can drill down, like each agenda can be kind of flexible. Like if you're speaking to a leader and it goes down a certain path, I would recommend going deep rather than going broad. Really try to understand the business from that person's perspective, and sometimes going deeper is better than broad. Okay, next one is attend department cadences. So if you're like most companies, you probably run company all hands, department all hands, company business reviews, things along those lines, right? And this is like an amazing way to understand what's actually happening with the business, what the business cares about, what challenges we're trying to overcome, and how we're serving customers, right? So you should always look to try and attend department cadences, or at the very least get recordings or slide decks or whatever it is that's coming out of that. So I would definitely recommend attending that. And I think what's really, really great is at a minimum when you're attending these business reviews, you're going to, one, get a better understanding of a business, but I think as well as an L&D leader, you may actually observe behaviors that you might, or skill gaps that you might be able to proactively suggest plugging as an L&D leader. So there's kind of like 2 benefits to doing this. The third tactical tip for understanding the business better is reading. I've been fortunate enough for the last 3 companies I've worked for in particular, like Amazon in particular is like heavy reading and writing culture. Apollo is a heavy reading and writing culture. Is like I read documents all the time. And it really helps you understand the context of the business. You understand what is actually the problems we're seeing today, how teams are trying to address them, what metrics we're trying to influence, what OKRs we have. Like it really gives you just a proper overview of what's going on in the business. So I recommend everyone like block time in their calendars, take time to read these documents. Another thing as well with the power of AI now is you can, and if you have a company-wide generative AI tool like an LLM like ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, and you're allowed to upload those documents into that, you can start to give this as context into your LLM. So then when you're starting to brainstorm solutions and ideas, it has relevant company context that you can help proactively suggest where L&D can plug some opportunities for the business. And the last one that I do on this section is go calendar sleuthing. So I think most companies now operate with like a work in plain sight kind of philosophy, and this is the same with like Google Calendar. You can see in people's calendars. And what I like to do is from time to time, especially if I'm trying to find time at that leader, is like understand what's actually on their calendar, understand what like it helps you empathize with how busy leaders and individuals are at a company, right? Because there's so much going on, and you can actually get a way better understanding of what that person's real day-to-day lived experience is. And maybe you might be a bit more empathetic when they don't complete that training that you put out with a 2-day deadline, right? It helps you understand how you can better serve your customers versus like, hey, we're just going to throw training out, expect everyone to complete it without actually understanding their current context. So that was the first part. Understand the business to solve business problems, not training problems. Feel free to just throw an emoji in on which one resonated with you most as I jump on to the next one, which is operate L&D like a business. So some of the best lessons I've learned in my career have not always been from L&D leaders. They've actually been from like functional and department leaders. And I'm trying to take in some of those lessons into how I run L&D as a function, whether that's either as an individual contributor or as a manager or leader, right? So what do I suggest that we do here? First thing is, I'll give an example, or I'll give a comparison. If you think about like sales today or a company, if you have a business, you have 2 approaches to go to market. One is you hope people come to you, right? Inbound marketing. You hope that they come to you, they know what you offer, they know how to request your services. And at a certain point, that's going to dry up, right? You're only going to get so far with that. You have to like do outbound to reach out to folks who you think are going to benefit from your products and services. And you should think about the same thing as your L&D function within a business, right? And leaders don't always know what L&D does. That's totally fine. Your job is to educate them. And when you're reading these business reviews, looking at company priorities, looking at what's going on in the business, you can actually reach out and say, hey, so-and-so, I actually think L&D can be a really strong lever here. I think we can create adoption of this way better than if we don't have L&D. Like you're actually promoting your team. And this, like we'll talk a bit about getting a seat at the table. This gets you a seat at the table. You're no longer becoming this order taker. You're actually making proactive suggestions how L&D can support and help. Run your show. So this is like, you should run your team like any other function, right? So what I do with my teams is we run regular bi-weekly project updates where we talk about key achievements, blockers, next steps. We have metrics that we look at. And I think this is just a good activity for everyone to do because it builds up credibility as well, right? Folks know that you are running your own ship and that they can trust you that if you're going to commit to something, you will do that. And again, with AI, you can create AI summaries of all the work that you're doing. Like it's really powerful, but I strongly recommend everyone just run their show, put some proper operating cadences in for their own team. Implement scalable feedback and impact mechanisms. So obviously all different learning interventions that you provide are going to have different impact mechanisms, depending on what behavior, knowledge, skill you're trying to change. But I personally believe that you should have a minimum requirement for all of your learning interventions. So generally speaking, what we do today at Apollo is we have like a survey that we include at the end of all of our training programs. And we also do this kind of confidence rating. And then in addition to that, we may, if depending on what the program is trying to achieve, look at specific like outputs of that. So for example, if we're doing an engineering training on being a growth engineer, we may look, did they ship an experiment? So there's specific behaviors we'll look at as well afterwards. But we try to give a baseline standard. And this will depend based on your environment. So like I worked in AWS where I built a pretty complicated survey process where we ended up getting 200,000 survey results a year. And that was like using Qualtrics, which went into like a database, which then went into a Redshift cluster, which then created a QuickSight visualization dashboard. That was pretty complicated. Today in Apollo, we do it mostly in our LMS out of the box. So you need to identify or work with the constraints of your business and what tools you have as well. So here's just an example of how we're like measuring confidence ratings in our programs that we do at Apollo. So we do like this pre-confidence rating and post-confidence rating. And at the very least, we can say we can measure some sort of percentage increase of like self-perceived confidence increase. So we get to understand, do people actually feel like they've gained value from this and gained confidence from this? And then this is just the dashboard version of this, like in the back end, where we can actually see what was the pre-training confidence levels, what was the post-training confidence levels. We ask an NPS type question for all of our training programs related to how confident they feel applying what they've learned. I know the grandfathers of learning evaluation are probably shaking their fists at me right now using an NPS type question. But we find it works for us and helps us understand overall sentiment of our learners. And then the final thing in this section is to build a toolkit to operate at the speed of business. So obviously, I think historically L&D has been this like ADDIE model, and you would do analysis, you would spend weeks and weeks doing analysis, then design, spend weeks. And I think now we need to move beyond that, right? And I think we have the tools available. 7TAPS is just an amazing example of this. You can give some pretty raw context, go through the Copilot, and get a great microlearning like out of the box in a few minutes. Same like we use an LMS in Apollo called Sana, which is just amazing. There's loads of AI capabilities and features. We use Descript for video editing, something that would take days of video editing, we can do in minutes now. And obviously we use ChatGPT for projects, custom GPTs, brainstorming, do QA checks of our content. Like really you want to make sure that you are not a bottleneck in the business and that you're actually providing value as quickly as possible. And last section, I know we're almost at time, which is build credibility instead of asking for it. So here's some tips I have to build credibility. Should L&D have a seat at the table? Yes, it should, but I think we need to make our own seat instead of being offered it. So first thing, avoid being the training gatekeeper. I'm not a big fan of saying only my team should create training. Let teams build the training that they need to build. Have those capabilities exist on your LMS. But what I do suggest is when your team builds training, make it very clear that it's your team that built it, because it should be like raise the bar in comparison to other trainings in the business, right? So how would you go about doing that? First thing is I like to make friends with my design team. I am not a designer. I'm not that great at it. But my design team, my marketing design team is fantastic. I reach out to them. I ask them to share all of the assets. I upload them to my LMS. I put them in 7TAPS. So everything looks on brand. It's sleek. It looks really nice. Just like really good and professional, really just resonates with our users. Second last point, do your research. So again, with this AI information era that we're in, it's no longer a stage of spending hours and hours and hours with SMEs trying to understand the problem, trying to understand solutions. We can get a lot of information from our company context, documents, wiki pages, etc. And then you use AI to help you do research and form an opinion on this. I strongly recommend we do this. This takes like development time. From my experience, what has been weeks to sometimes days, if even less. We can sometimes build a module in a day if we have the right context available. And finally, the final thing I want to mention is about obsessing over your learners. I think this is really important. You saw the GIF earlier on about like Monty Burns like shredding the feedback. I read every single piece of feedback for every course that we have at Apollo, and we create an overall sentiment analysis based on that. So we actually do things like this, show like our like heat maps of comments and anecdotes and how people are reacting to our training content. Yeah, so it's just really important that you obsess over your learners, try to identify solutions, and we reach out to folks directly when they give us constructive feedback to learn how to improve. I went through that pretty fast. My takeaways, just that I say for the team, is immerse yourself in the business as much as possible, set your L&D business up for success, and show up for the business to earn your seat at the table versus asking for it. Christopher, back to you.
Jonathan, hey, no, I thought, first of all, can we get a round of emojis for Jonathan here? And everybody always asks, will the slides be available? Yes, the slides will be available. So we'll get that to you. Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing that one. And, you know, I think first of all, one, I think you had some really great practical tips on what it is, because it's one thing to talk about, hey, we need to, be there for the business. It's another thing to actually pull it off. And it's easier said than done, for sure. So I actually want to address some of the questions that people had, because they had some good ones, and they're actually ones that were bounced on my mind as well. Being in the room, I feel like a lot of times L&D is the tail on the dog. Half the time, like, we don't hear about it until it's like, oh, by the way, this is rolling out next week. So can you get some training together for that? And you're like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Like, it would have been nice to know what you were doing ahead of time. Jackie had asked, like, what are some things that you do, or how do you, when time is limited, when maybe you get a 11th hour request, or you're struggling to get in the room because maybe they're just so busy down their thing, they don't remember to call you until the last minute. What are some things that you've done to kind of help close that gap?
Yeah, so I think, again, I try to proactively eliminate that where I can by, like you said, watching these business reviews, understanding what's going on, reading documents, and I proactively identified, oh, this is going to come on our side. So I try reach out if I expect that to happen. Sometimes that happens with experience, right? I think in those instances where you get the 11th hour request, which will always happen, it's like, okay, what do we need to deliver? Like, what's the most important thing? What can we feasibly do within that time? And then I bring up my toolkit and like, okay, this is the constraint we have. We need to get out by this date. These are the tools we have. We have 7 apps. We have a full-blown course. We have workshops we can do. What can we do to achieve that outcome in that time? We have like a bit of a discussion and collaboration on that. Yeah, and then I think I just go back to educating. It's like, hey, if you know this in advance, let us know. We can do an even better job. So yeah, but I think that's kind of some tactics that I've used.
Okay. Well, and I think, one of the things that you mentioned right at the end there that I think is so important sometimes is the relationship building, and just making sure people know who you are. And I mean, I know whenever I've been in orgs, I spend a lot of time just talking to people and hanging out with them, getting to know them, so that they're like, hey, why isn't Christopher in this meeting? Or why isn't somebody from his team in this meeting, type of a thing? And that takes time and energy to actually be able to do it. And I think one of the other things, I'm curious if you encounter this, it's easy in our industry to assume everybody knows what we do. I find most people outside our industry don't really know. And if you don't explain to them, like, what is our role, like, how do we work together, type of thing, most people are like, oh, I thought it was fine. I called you 3 days before the end and we just sent you the final materials and you made things. You're like, well, that's not really the best way to work with us. There are better ways, and we might even help influence the way you're thinking about a project. Okay, so another one that somebody asked, you talked about this biweekly project engagement. I got a question that was asked about it, was like, what does that look like? What does one of those meetings look like in terms of structure, content? Like, what are you doing in those biweekly project meetings?
Yeah, so today what we do is like a lot of it's async with our group because we're like a fully virtual company. And so my team, we like every 2 weeks they get a notification to update their projects. It asks them specific prompts. We have AI coach them to support writing their updates. That feeds into broader company KRs. And then at a company, departments, different levels, we will review those KRs together. So, and then there would be questions like, hey, why is this off track? What do we need to do? But it's no longer a training only problem. It's a department, it's a company wide or department issue, and we're brainstorming solutions together. Yeah.
Love that. All right, so I've got one final one that, it's the holiday spirit, so we can have some fun talking turkey back here. But let's just say hypothetically, you have some business leaders who have dumb ideas. I don't know. Not that anybody's ever gotten requests like that where you're like, that's stupid. How do you engage with some of that? Because they do come through where somebody's like, what we need training on is this. And you're like, oh, that's cute. What do you do to have that? How do you engage with leaders that have a great idea for training that you go, I don't think we really need that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is try to understand the stem of that idea. Like, where has that come from, right? So, and this is like everything we do in L&D. He's like, you don't jump to a solution, you jump to the problem, right? So what's the actual problem that is drives this solution that we've come up with, right? And it's like, okay, really try to nail that. And it's like, well, how would that solve this problem? Does that solve this problem? And honestly, I do a lot of playing devil's advocate quite a lot. I was like, so if we do this and we spend X amount of time and hours and nothing changes, what happens then? What do we do instead? So I do that quite a lot. And I joke about this, but I'm honestly quite often one of the first people to say we shouldn't do training. I was like, I don't think training is a solution here. And that, but I want to be very clear, because I think this is something you want to be careful about, is I think it's important that you don't just say we don't do training. You should make a suggestion on what you should do. And also, I think you should, I still think my team can help in this capacity, but I don't think a training is going to solve this problem. Because I think if you just become the no person, no one is going to reach out to you next time. They're going to be like, I'm just going to build my own training. Forget Jonathon. I'm going to build it. I'm going to roll it out. And yeah, so I think that's really important as well.
I love that, because it is about walking that delicate line. You don't want to be the department of no. You don't want to be the blocker. But at the same time, L&D's misunderstood, and everybody thinks they've got brilliant ideas for what they need training on. And I think your point is great, where it's like, well, like based on what you're trying to do, I'm not sure that that's the best way to do it. So let's talk about what we do instead.